We're going to start with a piece of sound that you tweeted out involving the Georgia's governor's race, which you are very strongly involved in. Stacey Abrams has a real chance here, and Brian Kemp, who is one of America's premier apartheid politicians, is using voter suppression, voter disenfranchisement, strategic white supremacy to fearmonger and lie and literally eliminate votes his way to the governorship and against this incredibly impressive run by Stacey Abrams. This is Brian Kemp. You tweeted this out earlier. Here he is talking with the ever correctly named Steve Doocy on Fox News. We're going to play that, and then you're going to tee off on it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, it means she wants the illegals to vote in Georgia. I mean, this is a shocking development in the campaign. While she was campaigning with Elizabeth Warren, she actually said this. Her network of groups actually filed a lawsuit that says the same thing in the lawsuit. And look, early voting starts in Georgia today. I think hardworking Georgians should decide who their governor is, not people here illegally like my opponent wants.
Yeah, but you're Secretary of State. It's not legal to, if you're in the country illegally, to vote, is it?
No, absolutely. It's against the law and it's against the Constitution, which makes it even more shocking that she would say that. But when you file a lawsuit, she's trying to get a pick of a liberal judge that will just make a ruling to order this. That's what the lawsuit's asking. That's why this is so extreme and a radical position, quite honestly, for my opponent. It's not just her saying this, but her, groups that support her that she helped create that have filed a lawsuit. And that's why we need hardworking Georgians to know and urge them to get out and vote and let them decide who their governor's going to be.
You know, Mr. Kemp, your opponent says you're trying to suppress the vote by holding up thousands of voter registration applications. What do you say to that?
Oh, that's a smokescreen trying to hide her radical views. Those folks that are on the pending list, all they have to do is go to the polls, show their photo ID, and they can vote. Again, this is just a distraction from her view of her groups filing a lawsuit to get non-citizens to vote in the state of Georgia. We're not going to allow that. We're going to have secure, accessible, and fair elections in our state. And by the way, they're not talking about the fact that we have more registered voters on our rolls now than we've ever had. And she voted against online voter registration that I helped create that's improved our voter rolls and has more people participating in the process.
Okay. Anoa, what did she actually say, and explain all the ways that this man is lying, please?
I mean, what's so funny, I'll just note this, what's so funny is, as they note on the Fox News on the segment, but of course it's Fox News so they don't go in for the kill with this, he's the Secretary of State. It's ludicrous when Republicans make these accusations, but this dude is in charge of the voter rolls. He's in charge of the elections, including his own, and he's afraid of, quote unquote, of non-citizens, of undocumented folks, quote unquote, criminal illegals, as he calls them, which is a horrible phrasing or whatever. But like, he's acting like he's really afraid that this could happen, but he's the one in charge. So if anything like that were actually to happen in large numbers, and we already know from all the different studies and results and stuff that have been done, that this is like, if it does happen, it's so negligible. It's rarely ever found anywhere in the country that this happens. But let's say this actually did happen, it would be because he failed at his damn job and was too busy purging actual citizens lawfully registered to vote and amidst this whole cadre of quote-unquote non-citizen voters who he thinks Stacey Abrams and Elizabeth Warren are trying to rally together. So what's he lying about? Elizabeth Warren and Stacey Abrams and Ayanna Pressley and some amazing folks here locally had a big rally on a HBCU campus in Clayton County, which is just south of Atlanta, last week. Part of the conversation is talking about what Stacey has been building since she launched her campaign last year, which is a campaign that's for all Georgians and building a Georgia that's for all. I know that sounds a little kumbaya-ish, but it's really what she's doing when you look at who she's bringing together to vote in this election. But what they talked about was the blue wave, and how the blue wave, what that means is not literally, and they explain this. They talk about this. It's not just the people who are expected to vote. It is all of our communities. And the fact that undocumented families, non-citizens, are also a part of our communities. They are welcome here in Georgia. What Brian Kemp is really saying is that people who are black and brown are not welcome in his Georgia. That's all he's saying. By the way, he aggressively pursues, purging African American, black, Latino, AAPI voters from the rolls over the last several years. This is not just, it's not just happening right now that he's running for governor. He's been doing this. There's a clip that MSNBC, I think maybe it might have even been Rachel Maddow played in 2014, where he talks about how if these organizations, meaning the New Georgia Project and other organizations, were allowed to register minority voters, this is in 2014 when he was running for re-election, that they will be able to win, that Democrats can't be allowed. Basically, he's already been on record talking about his fear of voter registration and participation of black and brown people. So we already know this man has a vendetta, not just against Stacey Abrams, who created the New Georgia Project in 2013, 2014, but has made it her mission to expand voting opportunity. So he likes to lie, he likes to throw in jabs, and he has the Governors Association, all these other groups that work with him to do this stuff. Fox News apparently has been hamming it up as well. But it's like, it's really ridiculous and insane what is happening here now. And to even say that the lawsuit that was filed, so to back up for everyone who might have saw the headlines of the last week, 53,000 Georgians have their voter registration on hold. They're pending. He is correct when he says that technically, per the law, voters can, with their proper ID, with their name that's substantially similar on their registration as on their ID, they can go to the polls and still vote if they were in queue to register and are just simply pending, right? That's if they've been like kind of added to the system. Because there are some people saying that they registered and they're not even showing up. So that's a whole nother issue. But for him to say that this lawsuit pertaining to the 53,000 is actually an attempt to get non-citizens voting. This law, these 53,000 people, 70% are black Georgians. They're black Southerners. So we have the re-suppression of the black vote happening right now. And it's, like I said, it's been happening in at least the last 8 years since he's been in office. So he's lying on multiple fronts. He's been sued multiple times. This exact match issue right now that involves the 53,000 Georgians, he was sued actually back in 2016 by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and the Law, along with several other groups. And they reached a settlement. And I think it was about 42,000 people at that time. And they reached a settlement in February 2017 about this exact issue. He was sent a warning letter, I believe, in July of this summer, ahead of this election about this exact issue. To now have 53,000 people, after they previously sent him warning letters, and for him to sit here and lie, it shows that, one, he's just a liar and he's not trustworthy, and two, he's scared. Yep. Because they are in a dead heat right now. And really, we believe the polls are underestimating her the same way they did in the primary.
Okay, that's perfect. So I want to know, because I think that you can answer both of these questions in sort of one that I'll set up. So I'll be really clear about this. I didn't follow the Georgia primary particularly closely. I don't know, I don't know enough. I spoke publicly for Stacey Abrams because you and Benjamin Dixon, who I know and friends with and respect, both live in Georgia and supported her. So I thought, okay, if she passes like muster with them, then I'm going to trust that she's a good candidate. So what is she, what's her campaign about? What's she running on? What's she talking about? And how does that overlap with your sense that maybe she's being underestimated in the polls?
Well, I'll take the second part, right, in terms of the polling. Okay. Because I just want to note we saw the same thing happen. Per the polling, Andrew Gillum was never supposed to be the nominee. Right. Per the polling, until that final weekend, Andrew Gillum was always in a distant third. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. There was like one random poll that had him second at that final weekend ahead of the election, and he won. But why I say the polling always had Stacey Abrams winning against her opponent in the primary, also named Stacey, both spelled the same way. Funny story, the Republican, the current lieutenant governor, who was the Republican favorite, Casey Cagle, his middle name is actually Stacey, also spelled the same way. So we would have had another Stacey versus Stacey race. But so the polling always had her winning, but the margin she ultimately won by was like unprecedented. Like no one from the polling would have expected her to have a blowout the way she did. She beat her opponent by like almost 50 points, and all the polling had it very close.
She beat her by 50 points?
Yeah, it was like
Okay.
73 to
Oh
27.
wow! I knew it was big.
something
I didn't know
like-
it was that big.
It was
Wow.
it was
Okay.
something forgive me guys because it's been a while since I looked at those numbers, but it was a huge gap. And what we saw and what we're not seeing it's the same thing we were saying in 2016 about the polls, right? How the polls just can't account for voting behavior and how campaigns are really building with field and engaging. They rely on old models and old ways of thinking about how to do electoral work. Now, post 2016, we're seeing a lot of candidates that are really investing in not just issue-based campaigns that are strong. And we saw this obviously when we saw Bernie Sanders run in 2015, 2016, his presidential run, standing strong on certain issues, as well as the grassroots movement that built around him. So we're seeing a lot of candidates who have built their own followings up just using that similar type of model, so to speak, right? So what we're seeing happening here, though, is we're seeing that polling isn't still not considering what they call low propensity voters, people who have not voted like in midterm elections, people who have sat out or non-voters. They're not counting new voters. They're not counting younger voters. Like these polls are riddled. Like there's a recent CNN poll that everyone's been going either gaga or angry about with showing that Joe Biden is leading the pack if he were to run for president. But that CNN poll, I think when we broke it down, it only looked at people over 45 and white. So the polling that we're seeing that's being pushed at us by mainstream media isn't really grappling with the reality that activists and organizers, the grassroots, is seeing actually on the ground in these campaigns. So what Stacey is running on are things like Medicaid expansion. Now, I know a lot of folks are like, but we need Medicare for all. I absolutely agree. But living here in the South, having immediate members of my family who, but for, Medicaid expansion will not be able to get Medicaid care, I'm okay with that being like a step in the right direction, because I believe that a lot of organizations like Our Revolution, like Center for Popular Democracy, like Democracy for America, have gotten in so early with Stacey and have been able to really help her, have the support she needs to move left the way she needs to strand progressively and strong.
Yep.
I mean, she's looking at, expanding opportunity in terms of pre-K education, really investing in universal pre-K.
That's a big issue.
That is a big issue. I mean, she moved left enough on enough issues, but and it's not just that she was doing this because she wanted to get the vote. We've had this conversation offline before, Michael, about how Black candidates, sometimes candidates of color, do not have the same access or support to be as progressive they want to be if they're dependent upon only these party systems and structures to support them when they're running. So with her, because she has built the support that she's built over the years, but also because organizations like Center for Popular Democracy, because I don't know if people listen when she talks. I listened to a talk she gave to like a construction union. I can't remember what it was, but like I listen to her when she talks and she'll say things like freedom to thrive. That's actually not only a hashtag, but it's also a theme that runs through this really brilliant report that Center for Popular Democracy did about how we can re-envision the way we spend money and resources in our local communities in terms of defunding police and investing in communities so that people have the freedom to thrive. So it's not that she's just repeating these terms and phrases, but it's really been imbued. And you can see it in the organizers who are working on her campaign and who have really been helping her flesh through some of these issues. She was the first gubernatorial candidate recently, this past week, and she's the first gubernatorial candidate to ever address Pride here in Atlanta. So she addressed Pride and she was the first person to ever do that. I mean, it's just a lot that's going on with her campaign that made sense to me in terms of education, public education opportunity, and what's at stake here in Georgia. Medicaid for all, Medicaid expansion is actually a very popular thing across both parties.
Yeah, of course.
Republicans, we've had so many rural hospital closures here, which really decimate not just health opportunity, but also entire, economies. And then you also have the burden of uncompensated care costs at the county and at the state level that's really been a huge issue when you look at that as well. So that's like one topic that she's been talking about that I think, again, for those who are organizing, like I appreciate my local DSA folks, and again, I'm not our DSA spokesperson here in Atlanta, but what I appreciate the way folks have been organizing is the fact that we want this other thing, But this immediate, thing that our legislature here stateside already has the support, in terms of people to do, gets us closer, and then we can build on that to help educate people for why we need to get to Medicare for all.
Well, and also expand their sense of what's possible. I mean,
absolutely,
that is the fundamental argument that always comes again with these. I mean, look, accelerationism is bullshit, and I'm not playing with other people's lives. And certainly I could speak personally to, as I've said, things like knowing the difference between home heating assistance being cut or funded, really basic stuff. But also the other thing that they don't, I mean, even Obamacare, which of course the best part of Obamacare was the Medicaid expansion, but even just the idea that there was some regulations put into place for HMOs to not be able to entirely abuse people. They still abuse people a lot because private insurance is, in my view, just fundamentally an abusive, parasitic proposition. But being that as it may, that enhanced people's expectations. Even that neoliberal centrist, like that's actually all true as describing that bill, that still enhanced people's conception. If you put people getting Medicaid on the table in the Republican governored, far right, anti-poor, anti-healthcare, anti-rural people, anti-people of color South, and people get that care, they're not going to sit and go, all right, well, that's cool. They might start saying, well, wait a second, what about that whole Medicare for all thing? That's how it works.
Well, I think one of the things like I said, from being in DSA and getting to know like some of the comrades across various different chapters, right? Like I throw jabs a lot on Twitter, especially at folks from the larger chapters, not because I don't think people are good people or aren't doing good work, but like there's a lot happening in the South, and I've learned a lot more being here in Atlanta, getting more involved around Stacey's campaign and starting to get to know, because when like the real organizers are like, yeah, this is how we're rolling, and not that, and you listen to the conversation, right? Because you'll see quote unquote real, like the real hardcore organizers, the folks that really be that crew out there all the time pounding the pavement, like you'll see those people maybe get behind a candidate and they're like, oh, this is the best we can do because someone else is so horrible. But like the idea was that Stacey actually is a good candidate, and there's an opportunity to actually push. Like she wants to expand, like the work that's been done locally with Song Southerners on New Ground and other organizations around ending cash bail reform here in the city of Atlanta. That is something that there's some remnants of criminal justice reform that were put in place, surprisingly, by our current Republican governor, who has chosen to support, obviously, the Republican nominee, who actually wants to undo his work. But Stacey, is looking to these organizers and stuff to expand upon this stuff at the state level. So when I love how people are actually, because I talk about this all the time, we need to build accountability into our support into the process, right? Yes. Nsé Ufot, who is the executive director of the New Georgia Project, as I mentioned, that's the organization that's been doing massive voter registration over the past few years, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but the numbers are like mind-blowing what their organization has done. They actually released a new app, a civic tech app, that if you put in, you put in your address and stuff, and it brings up all the different, it brings up your whole ballot for you right there on your phone. It goes through the different amendments and ballot issues. And so, they do a lot of work. They also have worked connected with local, celebrities and rappers, and they do like a souls to the poll type of thing, but then they do it from like the HBCU campuses. So they have rappers and reverends and HBCU students. And so there's all this great work that is happening. And so one thing Nsé and I talked about, though, was like, Stacey's our girl. We're here for this Black girl magic, but you best believe we holding her accountable. Right. Like, yeah, brunch, we love you, blah, 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 but you still going to come correct and do what needs to be done. So this is being built in the process. And no, there's no perfect candidate, right? There's no perfect candidate anywhere in the world. We're going to be upset with folks,
except for Lula. But that's my dude. I'm just playing. Go ahead.
But seriously, though,
yes.
this is what we have happening right now in Georgia. So what I'm seeing now in Georgia, I'm seeing like even the ladies who kind of drove me, the folks who kind of drove me nuts in 2016, like post 2016, the special election for John Ossoff's race, Like a lot of people are coming together and really like building community. Just yesterday, Black Voters Matter is an organization that has been like touring the South. They have this amazing, it's really dope, this amazing tour bus. I actually got to do a 2-day bus tour with their group through South Georgia, but they have this amazing bus, Black Voters Matter, and they've been going around doing voter outreach, doing GOTV stuff, like basically just helping where they can and helping to spread the love, because a lot of the rural areas, people think of rural and think it's just, oh, you know, white Trump supporters. There's a lot of people who are white in rural areas who didn't vote, who didn't support Trump either, right? But there's Black people in those areas, there's brown people, there's other people in those areas too. So they've been going through the South to like make the case. And also the South is a lot more progressive than it gets credit for. It's just that a lot of times people are cut off from opportunity, from resources, and they don't feel connected to anything. Like one of the things I'm finding through my current work, working with, you know, municipal candidates, is I have folks running for county commissioners in these like traditionally red communities. They are seeing some of the same issues of affordable housing, healthcare, homelessness that we're hearing about in our Oaklands, in our Atlantas, in our Chicagos, etc. And so they're getting excited when they're finally getting connected to people, because especially when you're living in a rural area, your nearest neighbor is however many miles away, you may not know that anybody else like you exists. So it's great when initiatives like this happen. But what happened though with Black Voters Matter yesterday though, Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright are the founders. They were taking a group of Black seniors to vote. Early voting started here yesterday in Georgia. They were really excited. They had a local senior herself who organized the event. And well, I don't know if she's a senior. My bad, sis, because you have gray hair, so I shouldn't assume. But someone who was local to the community, right, who was known by the seniors at this community center. They knew her. They trusted her. They all agreed. So they were excited. Latasha and Cliff and their crew were really excited to be able to do this service. I mean, to take 40, you know, predominantly Black women to go vote, that's like life-giving. I mean, Right. I was on the bus with them back when the Randolph County situation was happening, when they were trying to close those polls, and we got to go through the southern Georgia and stuff. So that was life-giving for me then. So I could only imagine what it is right now with all this energy. Well, somebody from the county got nervous or whatever, and they ordered them off the bus. They filed a complaint, and the Senior Citizen Center was just like, well, someone complained and they're worried, so everybody has to get off the bus and we can't do this today. So they stopped them from taking over 40 Black seniors to go vote yesterday. These people are still going to go vote, and they were even more fired up. That's so and they're going to tell, you know, but this is what's happening. It's not just here, it's across the board, and it's sick.
Yeah, definitely want you to elaborate on that in 30 seconds, or not. I'll ask about it in 30 seconds, but I just wanted to note, I liked what you alluded to before about sort of like even like kind of some of the OSEF people. And one thing I think, especially in contrast to like all of the, you know, social media spiciness and everything that people gets into, is that, and also the fact that it's okay that people have genuine ideological disagreements in a coalition. That's actually very healthy and good for an ecosystem. But some things are resolved by people actually doing things together, right? Like we look at things differently, but we're working to elect Stacey Abrams. We look at things differently, but we're working, you know, on a particular ecological or justice or, you know, global initiative. Like not just, you know, reviewing each other's hot takes, which, you know, of course I do and everybody does, and it's fun and it's great, whatever. But I think some of that stuff is literally addressed by doing things together.
Agreed. Like, and when we actually move people past these like hyper silos on social media, we find the commonality, and we're able to build. That doesn't mean we ignored like bad or idiotic things people are doing. But so we're seeing it, and we're seeing support not just for Stacey Abrams, but for also candidates down the ballot. You know, we got Shelley Hutchinson running in, I can't remember the House district or whatever. We got amazing candidates. We got Aisha Yacoub running. We have El Mahdi Holly running down in House District 111, Regina Lewis Ward in 109. Those were actually two of the candidates present with the infamous now infamous Eric Holder comments. Like, there's a lot happening, and we have, Michael, I know we got to go, but like, let me just
we have a few more minutes.
Fact.
Go.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, go.
So with this fact, though, there were 6 counties that went red to blue in 2016. I know everyone always focuses on all the counties that went blue to red. Oh my God. But there were 6 counties that flipped red to blue, right, in 2016. 3 of them are here in Georgia. Henry County, where Regina Lewis Ward and El Mahdi Holly are, and Gwinnett County and Cobb County. Gwinnett County, all of those are right.
And
right
these
on
are
the
state rep races we're talking
These
about?
are state rep
okay,
races.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So there are these. We're seeing one in the Georgia primary. We saw explosive turnout. Yes, there were more Republicans and Democrats in voting in the primary, but what we saw was a huge increase in Democratic participation in the primary and a real narrowing of the gap between Republican and Democratic turnout. When we look at the general in the past 2 cycles, like it's been such a small just percentage difference between in the final vote. So when we're just extrapolating out and looking at the participation in the election, as well as these candidates who are running now in these districts, like the people I've been mentioning, like we have folks who are also endorsing it. Yeah, Shelley Hutchinson is in House District 107, which is in Gwinnett County, which is one of the counties that flipped and went from red to blue. It's also one of the most diverse or rapidly diversifying counties in the country or something like that. Like there are these places in the state that are now minority majority districts, but they have not had anyone of color actually running in them. Now I'm with a lot of folks, you know what I'm saying? I know folks that they back up by identity politics. For me, representation always matters, and y'all can come hit me up on Twitter if you funky and we can talk about more about that. But it's important that we have people who are actually reflecting and representing the communities they come from, as in the mindset which these candidates are, as well as in actual lived experiences, et cetera, right? So having a Black woman social worker mom like Shelley, who is representing her district, which it looks more like her than the incumbent, is important. Having a district down in Henry County with Regina Lewis Ward, who's originally actually from Brooklyn, big ups to Brooklyn,
okay,
and
right.
El Mahdi Holly, like having those 2 people, running in a district which actually has been redistricted 3 times in the past 5 years, having them overcome the incumbents they're running against and actually reflecting and representing the district where they are is important and valuable. And yes, I'm plugging these people because they're also right on the issues. If y'all know me, I don't just roll people because they Black.
Right. Well, I mean, that's to me like, yeah. I mean, I think
there's folks I won't even mess with. So
no, I mean to me like, I mean, I think everything is there's always a dialectical relationship, and I think that like a lot of that initial critique was people like the Clinton campaign saying, everything is subordinate to an identity, and that's trash. That's wrong. That is a totally different thing than saying, of course. And by the way, like literally across the board, I don't have a problem, not if it's positioned in a racist way, obviously, but I don't have a problem if somebody's like, hey, I grew up in some rural district somewhere, and maybe I want somebody who has farming experience, right? Like we could really expand the bounds of people wanting to have some sense that who represents them share an experience with them is not a radical notion, and it shouldn't be to anybody. Like it's actually pretty obvious. Actually, real quick before I ask you the final question, you have a candidate, I believe, in Boston that you wanted to talk about. Can you do that?
Yes, and okay. I do. I need everyone to go check out Rachel Rollins for Suffolk County DA. Rachel Rollins is running for Suffolk County DA. DA races also have a county. I'm about to slip this one in. Mark Hayes is running in Hennepin County, Minnesota. Got DA candidates running across the country. We've already seen with Kemp Fox and Larry in Philly. Like we've seen the way DA
matters.
It matters
a lot. Who's in the DA position?
Rachel Rollins is, similar to the DAs we saw before her, like, Krasner and others, like, is really trying to, addressing issues with cash bail, ending cash bail, addressing, like, she's declining to prosecute actually certain lower level offenses and have them handled with community service or other things. And she's getting a lot of flack. So I need folks to check her out. I will definitely be tweeting about her and stuff like that. But I need folks to check out Rachel Rollins, give her a boost, give her support. Go, if you're in the area, go volunteer with her campaign, help them out, because she's running, even though Boston is a Democratic city or whatever, she's running against an independent who's backed by the police police, who has prior DV charges from his with his wife or ex-wife, I can't remember. But the police are trying to handpick once again their DA. Same similar things happening in Hennepin County, Minnesota, which is the largest. I think it's the largest county in Minnesota. It's where Minneapolis is. Mark Hayes is running against a 20-plus year incumbent who actually prosecuted a young black trans woman several years ago for defending herself. He prosecuted her for attempted murder for defending herself when she was actually being physically attacked and violated outside of a jail. It was actually Coco. It's actually not Coco. Apologies, sis. Cece. It's actually Cece McDonald. It's actually a famous case. So like he's also been a part of the war on drugs. And just like he actually tried to testify in the early 2000s against the disproportionality between crack and cocaine sentencing. So like he needs to go.
That was what Republicans got on that one.
But he's a Democrat. Though.
And he's a Democrat, right?
So this is in Hennepin County. This is an instance where any blue won't do.
Absolutely.
So these are two DAs. I need y'all on this. I'm gonna give Michael some more information to tweet out and stuff, but I need y'all to look at these two DA races. And I got some more local elections and stuff I was tweeting about earlier. So y'all, if y'all want to know what's going on with municipal elections, definitely hit me up, because that's where that's what gives me hope right now with all this craziness is the local level stuff.
So I think it's fair to say, and I'm definitely supportive of Stacey Abrams. I'm supportive of Andrew Gillum, and I would say, and I always draw the distinction, right? There's like my favorite candidates: Bernie Sanders, AOC, Connie Ing, Barbara Lee. Then there's people that I like and I need to know more about, but I'm actually like, if I could vote for them, it would be an affirmative vote. And that's Andrew Gillum, Stacey Abrams, and some other candidates whose names are escaping me right now. And then there's other candidates like, I would also vote for Bill Nelson in Florida because I'm a harm minimized voter. Sorry, right? Like, that's how it is. But when you look at candidates like Gillums and Abrams, who are like genuine center-left candidates, definitely Abrams moving very strongly in the right direction. She has people like you in her circles, which to me is like a bigger metric for measuring where they're going than they are in some ways, because that's the context for campaigns is a bigger deal, the structure around them. And you look at the broader changing, just demographics and ideological leanings of people who would vote Democratic across the board in the South, combined with the fact that obviously this is the war on voting rights and civil rights is intensifying, although it has been going on for quite some time, as you say. Do you see a future where the Southern Democratic Party, and maybe also, I know you're one of the things I love about you is how historically oriented you are. So there's also the hidden Southern left history, which, also exists as well. Do you see a scenario where the Southern Democratic Party goes from like, Bill Clinton pulling everybody to the third way and to Tyson Chicken versus, Stacey Abrams and others actually pulling the Democratic Party towards genuine commitments on health care, on ending cash bail, on, the environment, justice, and so on?
I think we're at the very beginning of the possibility of that happening. While I personally am not a Democrat identifying, I do, caucus with them from time to time. But from Ching, I'm a Georgia Bernie, right? Like,
yep. That was very Bernie of you.
But I caucus with them frequently because they're often right on the issues that I need to see, and quite a few. I mean, I have a lot of hope when I look at some of the folks who are running for county chair right now. I have some friends who are strong progressives who are looking in the right direction, who get this, who are nurturing and getting out there and organizing and emphasizing field. So it's possibly eventually the party could go in that direction. It just depends upon if we as progressives are actually building our pipeline. I think Abrams is doing that through her campaign, the way she's nurturing and providing opportunity. I think despite some of the issues I've noticed with Gillum's campaign and some of the interference, I will say, from the Florida Democratic Party, he has done that as well. I've met probably one of the youngest people I've ever met involved in data, who worked with his campaign, who's only about 22, 23 years old, and she was his data director.
Cool.
So, I see that there are those, it just depends upon whether or not we as a block stay, one, engaged and organized, and that we, two, work on expanding our ranks and building the pipeline to come behind us. So I don't think with Abrams' win it's going to be an overnight, thing, but I do think it definitely makes the case for the strategy that she's been employing. We're talking about expanding the electorate and really investing in what it looks like to have a coalition of progressive, leaning white people and people of color voters. Because when we're looking at the South, when you're looking at Georgia in particular, Georgia has not had more than 30% of the white vote going Democrat since Bill Clinton in 1992. It's been steadily around between 22 and 25% of the vote since the late 90s. And Abrams is polling at about 27, 28%. So she's doing slightly better. But that's also because in the last several years, we've had an influx of progressive white people into the South. Right. We've had an influx of more and more people of color into these states as well. I mean, Georgia's on its way to being a majority minority state in the next, I think, 10 years or so, because of the huge population shifts that we're seeing across the state. So, I mean, can it happen in the South? There's some amazing work being done. Project South has been doing work across the entire South as well as Puerto Rico. I mean, we're seeing, what we've been seeing with Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi. So it's possible, but it's going to take time. Just the same thing, I think it's possible we can shift the nation, but it's going to take time. And we have to build a pipeline, and we have to stay organized.
Anoa Changa, everybody should follow her. Find all of the links to all of the ways you can.
Well, I'm on Spotify now, too, guys.
You're on Spotify? Now I'm pissed. We're not on Spotify. What the fuck?
I'll tell you. Now it's like I get on Spotify and then 3 days later they announce that everybody with a podcast can get on Spotify. So I was special for 3 days. So. But there's a lot of amazing work happening down here. Shout out to Eric Robinson and Insay Ufat with New Georgia Project Action Fund. Like I said, candidates that I'm most excited about. These are not the only ones, but these are some of the ones top of my head. Shelly Hutchinson. Aisha Yaqub is an amazing young Muslim sister who's running for state house. Renita Shannon is dope and she's an elected official herself, but has been organizing and canvassing for all these other amazing progressives all cycles. So, El Mahdi Holly and Regina Lewis Ward, tons of great people as well. So don't just look at what's on the top of the ticket. If you're really annoyed with whoever's on top of your ticket where you are, looking to see what's happening with local races. If you don't have a local race right now, you're going to have a local race in the next cycle or two, because there's literally a local election happening all the time. And you guys will possibly be having a special election for a public advocate. Yes. I might have to come into New York soon. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. Well, Nomiki Konst. That's going to happen. And when you come to New York, you have to come do the show in studio. Anoa, thank you a million as always. Anoa Changa.